So in this tutorial, we're going to learn about a graph called a histogram. Now this graph might be somewhat new to many of you. If we look at this particular graph down here, you're going to notice some things that look similar. So it looks very much like a bar graph because there's bars and then there's a frequency here and then there's intervals along the bottom, which is a little bit different from a bar graph. So if we notice, bar graphs usually have spaces between them and have categories, such as if my favorite color is blue, yellow, green, or orange, that would be then categorized across the bottom. Well, you'll notice with histograms is that the numbers along here are broken down into intervals, and it's used to look at something like, for example, as a teacher, if I wanted to see the range of scores on a math test, I could use it. Or if I was a golfer and I wanted to know the range of scores in golfing and how many people fall in, this much under par versus this much under par versus this much under par. So it's looking at, instead of looking at the data as individual pieces, it's breaking it down into who falls in certain intervals and how many people fall in each, and then you make this histogram. You'll notice the no bars, and usually when we make a histogram, we want to have between 5 and 10 intervals. So we want to break our data into somewhere between 5 and 10 intervals. So let's go through how we might do that. So let's say, for example, you were given this bunch of data, which is times on a 200-meter run. So again, we could graph all of these times, but that's a lot of numbers and it's not going to necessarily make sense to us. So instead, as a phys ed teacher, what you might do is think, how many people fall within each category? And so down here, you'll notice that they've broken it down into categories between 25 and 29.9, 30 and 34.9, and so on. That's going to be more useful for someone that is analyzing the data and looking at it. At first glance, they'll be able to tell, where are most people? Where do most people fall? How many people have a low speed? How many people have a high speed? And so on and so forth. Whereas just looking at a whole bunch, like up here, there's 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 20. There's 28 numbers. That's a lot of numbers to have in one graph to make sense of. So what you have to do first is you have to organize it into these intervals. And what you're going to do is you're going to find, so who falls into what? And so, for example, we look at 40.4 and we say, okay, 40.4 will fall here, and then I recommend crossing it off. 36.4 will run here and cross it off. 42.6 is here. As you go, you cross it off because it's easy to miss one. And so it's much easier to keep track as you go and cross off as you go. And be really careful because it is easy to make mistakes here. So you want to make sure that you're reading carefully and you're not putting something in the wrong area. 5, you can just go across like that. When you are choosing your intervals, so you'll notice these intervals were already chosen for you. You want to choose numbers that are fairly easy numbers. So that's why we basically chose almost between 25 and 30. The reason, however, that we didn't say 25 to 30, 30 to 35, and so on, was if they both have 30, where are you going to put it? Would you put the 30 here or would you put it here? And so that's why you do 25 to 29.9, and then the next one is 30 to 34.9. So I'm going to just pause this and I'm going to finish and then I'm going to restart the recording and you're going to see it all filled in now that you know how the tallies work. So what you're going to see here, if we look, what I always do after I've tallied it up is I add up all my marks to make sure that it equals how many people I had. So I had 28 people. So I want to make sure that this adds up to 28 people. So if I look, 7, 18, 28, and so I know it equals 28 people. So now I'm ready to make my graph. So when I make the graph, here's where I have number of students, or you could call it frequency, and then here are the times. And so what I need to do is I have 5 categories, so I need to break it down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, I would use graph paper, and then I'm going to label each section. So again, when you're making your own intervals, you want to find, you'll notice each interval is equally spaced out. They're all approximately 5 seconds in length. You wouldn't want the intervals to be like you wouldn't want this one to be 5 seconds and this one to be 15 seconds and this one to be 10. You want them all to be the same. What you generally do when finding an interval is you find the smallest number and you find the biggest number, and then you ask yourself how many intervals you want. So for example, if the smallest number was 5 and the biggest number was 50, the range is 45. And so it would make sense for you to break that down into, say, 9 intervals of 5 each. And so you kind of go through a little bit of a thought process. If you had, say, 40 numbers to get through, you might break it down into 8 intervals of 5 or 5 intervals of 8. You want to keep the numbers as friendly and easy as possible. And then up here, what you're going to do is you're just going to put your tally. So we go up to 11. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'll go up to 12. And then, again, you would use graph paper. You would have these all equally spaced out. You'd make sure that, for example, if this is 1 square, this is 1 square, this is 1 square. You don't just go 2 squares and then 1 and then 2 and so on. You have to keep it the same. And then all you're going to do is you're going to make your bars. So the only difference is you don't put spaces. So that's going to be our bar for that one. Then 6 will just go straight up. Again, you would use a ruler. And then 11, we'd go up. So you just don't have spaces between them. And all the bars should be the same thickness. And you can color them in, but essentially that's what your histogram would look like. And so as a phys ed teacher, for example, you could look at this and very clearly you could see most people in the class fall in the 35 to 39.9 range. You only have one person that's really, really fast, and you only have a couple people that are a little bit slower. So for the most part, your class is where you might want it to fall. And again, that's why we make a histogram, to see what the trends are, to see where most people, the majority of people would fall.